another study by Bud and some of Kelstead and some of the other colleagues he works with looked at, they did a wonderful survey in the early 90s of about 5,000 religious activists from groups like Focus on the Family to Bread for the World. And so Christian activists, they got the mailing list for people involved with those groups and did a mail survey. And they looked at a lot of different questions, but they did a paper on environmentalism among these activists. And here's what they found. They did a very careful, in my opinion, statistical analysis, a multivariate analysis that helps control for some of the economic and other factors, education factors that might be associated with being an evangelical. And they found our analysis of environmental attitudes among religious activists in public life suggests there's a significant connection between theological perspectives and attitudes towards environmental policies and priorities. And they had a measure of fundamentalism. In the paper, they go into a lot of discussion on the construction of it and why you ought to construct it that way. But they found fundamentalists were associated with lower values being put on environmental things, and theological liberalism being linked with more embrace of environmentalism. Now, a link, I think, between this and the consumer science, consumer economics literature has to do with wealth. And a really prescient quote from Jean Mayer in 1970, at a time when China was very poor. She said, it might be bad in China with 700 million poor people, but with 700 million rich Chinese would wreck China in no time. It's the rich who wreck the environment, occupy more space, consume more of each natural resource, disturb ecology more, litter the landscape, and create more pollution. And so there's been a debate in the literature about, along with the role of theological perspectives, what's the role of other factors? And a lot of people, Moncrief being one of them, think those are as important or more important because of a lot of historical counterexamples to the white assertion. Now, the way we understand economic behavior, we are getting an increased importance put on social context in consumption and in demand for goods, and the role of relative position in a social ordering. Think of something like a person is moving with their family into a new community, and they find out about what the good schools are. And their idea is, I want to do the best thing for my kids. I want to move in the community with the best schools. This kind of economic behavior is essentially positional. There's a limited number of houses that go to those schools, and so there's only a certain number of people that are going to be in the best school. Or think of college admission, which is another one. There's rankings of colleges. All the colleges want to be the best college, but not all of them are going to get ranked that high. And parents and kids are going to work to get in the best college. So a lot of resources get spent on pursuing this positional attribute of a good. Well, the idea is that a lot of economic behavior is positional. Now, a lot of economic behavior is not, and it's inconspicuous. It's things that we can't observe easily. It might be public goods. It could be things like outdoor recreation, clean environment, time spent with your family and friends, safety, autonomy in the workplace. These things aren't easily observed goods. They're not easily traded in many cases. And so they're inconspicuous, but a lot of consumption is conspicuous. Consumption, especially that gets you access into a group or special opportunities like the school district, like the college, to get in the best college. You may be taught exactly the same things, but your colleagues and friends may have give you a network if you go to Harvard compared to, SUNY Geneseo. you know, it's just completely different in terms of your network that you get there. And those kinds of things where there's a price to get into it are these kinds of competitive sort of consumption we're talking about. Juliet Shore, consumer economist at, I think, BU now, talks about how important your reference group is for consumption patterns and how we've seen a shift from the 40s and 50s where people would look at their neighborhood for their reference group, and now we tend to make our reference group based on our workplace and on television. And she has an argument about why that has influenced and pushed people to consume, in some cases, beyond their means. So I've mentioned how there can be a conflict between the individual and the group. And the thing, think about someone who's applying for a job and they want to look good. And one person buys a really sharp suit. Maybe they spend $800 or $1,000 on the suit and they look good and they get the job. Well, the next round of job interviews, people, you know, they feel like they need to do the same thing to keep up. We see this kind of behavior where the individual has an incentive to spend to get this positional good, but the whole group taken together actually loses welfare because a lot of other people are spending but not getting any of the benefit. I think some of our housing patterns have this attribute now. And Robert Frank thinks this is the greatest explanation for the imbalance, the indebtedness in our current consumption patterns. So I've talked about some of these elements of a positional good. It's a good whose utility depends on how it compares with others in the same category. So like which college in a ranking system, or the suit, is it sharper, is it better than the other person's, or a home, is it have more status, and that the individual can compete, but the whole group can suffer an inefficiency. A lot of you might be familiar with the stadium metaphor, where some behavior may make sense for one person, like standing up at the stadium to get a better view, but when everyone stands up, we all spend more energy standing up, and the view is the same. This is pretty common economic phenomenon, and what Frank is arguing about in a recent paper just published this year is that it's very common, and that it also, the logic is, if this is in fact inefficient, it opens the scope for some public policies to address the inefficiency and provide public goods, including investment in the environment, that everyone can share and would make everyone better off. Now, economists don't like this line of thought in general, but here's some reasons why it might be compelling. Here's a study of happiness in Japan over time, which is the flat bar at 6. So the happiness is a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 is extremely happy on this left axis. And you can see that income in Japan on average has increased over that time period from 61 to 88 and gone up. But happiness overall hasn't changed at all. What this suggests is that a big part of happiness is relative position. There's some other studies looking at happiness in the US, and we have people at the U of I studying happiness. And if you look at the US, you'll see correlations between happiness and real income for folks. So there's a strong correlation between your position in the economic terrain and how happy and well off you feel. So along with Frank, I think I would have to agree that a relative income view can explain this, this puzzle.
We should all move to very poor countries, basically.
Well, some people do, don't they? Retirees move to like Honduras,
yeah,
and they're your king of the hill on $15,000 a year.
Or come from the coast of the Midwest.
I don't think that will happen, but yeah.